All right, so my name's Chris Ford. For those of you who I don't know, there are a couple people in the room that I haven't met at church and everything. Go up a little bit more. Hello? There we go. So I have a radio show on Sundays on Mojo 50, and it's called The Generation Y Conservative. I talk about politics. I talk about religion. Sometimes that gets under the skin of some people, even in my own party and everything. One thing I do want to mention, though, tonight is that what we are going to discuss, and the topic is the separation of church and state, does not have anything to do with party lines, okay? I believe that this applies to Democrats, or applies to Republicans, maybe not the extreme left, but that's okay. We're going to talk about everything. So there's two things that I think a lot of people are used to hearing as they grow up, and some of the younger people, like my kids, haven't experienced this publicly yet or anything, but how many people, by a show of hands, have heard at least the expression or been told as they're growing up that it is taboo to talk about religion and politics? Right? We're going to dispel that, okay, tonight. By the end of this conversation, I want you to realize why that has been told to us over time. I'm going to explain where religion comes into play with politics, and we're going to discuss a couple things. Now, the other thing I want you to realize is that for a very long time, I think most of us have heard that there is the separation of church and state, right? More specifically, we have been told for decades now, I would say, and it's been getting more aggressive, that this country was not founded on Judeo-Christian values, okay? If you believe that, go ahead and raise your hand, because I want to change your mind tonight. I don't want to throw you out there as bait or anything, but that's something that I really want to discuss with you, okay? Now, when we think about the founding of our country, a lot of people jump back to the 1700s with the Founding Fathers. Great group of individuals, very inspiring and way ahead of their time. If you look into their words, which we're going to do tonight, you're going to see that they set things up, and every word that they wrote was written very specifically for a purpose, okay? And we're going to look into that in the Declaration of Independence. We're going to talk about the Constitution. But when I think about the founding of this country, I believe that there are two time periods in which we had a founding of this country. And to start, I think that we need to jump back even further to the Pilgrims, okay? Now, one of the things that I was looking at as I was trying to put together all the research and everything for you tonight is that there's a couple websites, even Christian websites, I think there was one Christian.com or something, that said that if you believe that the Pilgrims came here because of religious persecution, you're actually wrong on that, okay? Now, their reasoning for that is that because the Pilgrims went to, I believe it was Holland, right? First, Holland, they escaped to Holland. And by the way, before I go any further, if you've never seen Kirk Cameron's movie Monumental, great history lesson on the Pilgrims, something that you will never hear in public education, okay? After escaping to Holland, the Pilgrims actually came over here because they were trying to escape from something, okay, and that was religious persecution. But what they found in Holland first is that they were not allowed in that culture to exercise freely what they wanted to. So the articles that I was reading were actually saying that they didn't escape here for religious persecution because they first tried Holland, and that's somehow an excuse as to throw into the argument that they didn't come here, which I categorically disagree with, okay? But I want to show you an example of something real quick, and I'm going to ask for a couple volunteers, okay? So the first one, I'm going to have Alex come up here. Whoop. Just put that. So what I want Alex to do, and I'm going to ask two more people to do this as well, just open up the Bible and read one line from it, okay? Just any page and just read one line. Just pick one, anyone.
The Lord reigns forever. He has established his throne for judgment.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to give this to you real quick here. If you could pick out one line and just read it for me, okay?
I don't know if I can read it. For the director of music, to the time of Do Not Destroy of David the Malachi, when Saul had seen men to watch David's home in order to kill him.
Okay, that's good. How about you? You mind giving one for me? Oop. There you go. Just any line out of there.
The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, take a census of the Kohathite branch of the Levites by their clans and families.
Thank you very much to everyone for that. What you just witnessed there may not have seemed like much to you now, but what we witnessed is a miracle in 3 times in a row right there, okay? And the reason is because what you don't learn too much about with the pilgrims is that the reason why they came here is because the ability to pick up the Bible was not afforded to them. They were not allowed to hold this in their hands and study it themselves. What happened was the king had direct orders through the church, through the priest, and the priest would read them to them from the Bible, and only what the king allowed them to read. Okay? So when the pilgrims started doing this in secret, they were going to homes and reading it by candlelight in secrecy, knowing that they weren't allowed to do that, and if they were caught, their possessions would be taken from them and they would be thrown into shackles in a lot of cases. So the ability to read this, for my daughter to read this, for these two to read this, is a modern day miracle for you to witness that we just let slip by now and think that it's nothing. So it's amazing that we have this ability today for the Word to actually come to all of us in the amount that it has. Okay, still, I believe, the #1 selling book in the world, followed by Atlas Shrugged, which you should also read. So, when the pilgrims were coming over here, on the ship, John Winthrop delivered a sermon right before they got to America, okay? And it was in regards to what they were about to encounter and what they were going to do with God's Word. So I want to read it. Obviously, I'm not going to deliver a whole sermon tonight, but I want to deliver a portion of that sermon because it applies to what we're talking about. The Lord will be our God and delight to dwell among us as his own people, and will command a blessing upon us in all our ways, so that we shall see much more of his wisdom, power, goodness, and truth than formerly we have been acquainted with. We shall find that God of Israel is among us, when 10 of us shall be able to resist 1,000 of our enemies, when he shall make us a praise and glory that men shall say of his succeeding plantations. May the Lord make it like that of New England. For we must consider that we shall be as a city upon the hill. The eyes of all people are upon us, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a story, and by word through the world. We shall open the mouths of enemies to speak evil of the ways of God and all professors for God's sake. We shall shame the faces of many of God's worthy servants and cause their prayers to be turned into curses upon us till we be consumed out of the good land whither we are going. We shall be as a city on a hill. Now, a lot of you here should recognize something like that, right, Donna? So, in the King James Version of the Bible, in Matthew 5:14, the text reads, "Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid." Well, Jacob's church here uses the line, "A church on a hill shining forth for Jesus Christ." Jesus Christ. Started a little there. So, the ability for the pilgrims to come here and be able to worship freely, the difference between here and Holland was that you didn't have to come into a world with writing already on the slate, right? This was a completely new slate, wiped clean. Now, there's a lot of problems that we have with public education today. If you actually want to see more about my thoughts on public education, I would encourage you to go to my YouTube channel and look up a breakup letter with public education to see what I really think about what's going on today. But among those things are something that a lot of people have learned in regards to the interaction between the Indians and the Pilgrims, or the Native Americans and the Pilgrims, will be politically correct for tonight. One of the things that we are taught in school, and I know I was taught in school, was that the giving of the blankets with the diseases on them that got the Indians sick, right? That we should be shamed of our lineage of that because the Pilgrims intentionally gave them these diseases. What they fail to realize, or what they fail to teach, is that the germ theory wasn't discovered until centuries later. So no one even knew what germs were. So at best, this was a mistake by the Pilgrims. And as proof of that, proof of the relationships between the Native Americans and the Pilgrims, we can actually see trials that the Native Americans had among themselves for the mistreatment of the Pilgrims by their own kind. So the relationship there was fantastic. What happened was it disintegrated as conquistadors and business people came over into our country and everything. But what we have here is the Pilgrims coming over here specifically to have the freedom to worship, and that's very important. So in my mind, the first founding of this country has everything to do with Christian principles that we tried to bring here and practice freely and be able to hold this in our hands and be able to read it. Now, one thing that I find fascinating about history is that we have to jump all the way forward, and we learn very little in regards to what happened between that time and the Founding Fathers. It seems like it's always the next thing that we learn is what the Founding Fathers did, right? So how did we go from a time where the Pilgrims came over here to start this ability to worship freely, and then get to a time when colonies were set up and the king is back in order again and ruling us from across the ocean, right? Well, we hear a lot of times that our founding fathers were also not religious people. And we're going to hear a lot tonight in regards to how that is not true. Before we get to the Danbury Baptists, what happened before that? The Declaration of Independence. Let's start there, right? We just celebrated July 4th. I want you to think about this. This is a fact that I always love throwing out there because we go to watch the fireworks. We celebrate our freedoms and liberties. We celebrate those that fight and have shed blood for us in order to do this. You okay? Okay. What people don't actually think about is the action of declaring that they wanted to be free from the king at that point in time. If you really think about it, the Declaration of Independence was a death note for our founders. The fact that they said, we are separating from you, the king, and we want to be free of you, and signing their signatures on the Declaration was saying to the king, I have put my name here for you to see that we are declaring for our people that we want to be free from you. So when the British come, and they did, those people were at the top of the list for who were the enemies of the king. Okay? I find that fascinating. Now, here's another interesting fact for you, too. The Declaration was first signed by John Hancock on July 4th, 1776. The other founding fathers didn't sign it for, I believe, another 8 days later, and George Washington didn't find out about it until the 9th, I believe. But one of the interesting things, and something that a lot of kids and students today will never know, is the mode of communication, right? So the king and the country didn't actually find out about the Declaration of Independence, didn't receive it in their hands until August 30th. because it had to go by ship and everything else. Nowadays, you send an email and the king would be pretty pissed off at you right away. Okay, so I find that fascinating. So August 30th is really another day that we should celebrate as well, because that was the actual time that the king held that in his hand and saw that we wanted to separate from him. Now, let's talk about the Declaration of Independence, okay? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, I got done telling you earlier about how the Founding Fathers intentionally wrote words to hold a weight of meaning for everything. So let's take it line by line and actually go through how much weight they put into religion itself. We hold these truths to be self-evident. There is no questioning that. There's no questioning these truths. That all men are created equal, not born equal, created equal by our Creator. And that they are endowed by their Creator, God, with certain inalienable rights. That among these are life, which we seem to have a big problem with in society today, right? We'll get to that in a little bit on why religion is so important in politics. Liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Now, why wouldn't they just say that you have a right to happiness? Because happiness isn't guaranteed, okay? But your pursuit, your ability in America is guaranteed to you within our constitutional rights, that you have that freedom to pursue things. You might hit obstacles. You might hit brick walls. You might hit the wall. I don't know. But you have the ability to pursue these things, and you can overcome obstacles in this country that you cannot overcome in other countries. Okay? Let's jump forward a little bit more. Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers that actually signed the Declaration of Independence, becomes president. Okay? There was a group in Connecticut, the Danbury Baptists, that wrote to President Jefferson that they were concerned about our First Amendment. So I want to do a little test with you right here. There are 5 things that are mentioned in our First Amendment. So let me see if anybody knows them. So what's one of them? Who was it? Freedom of speech. Okay, that's one. Who else? Back there. Freedom of religion. Another good one. Okay. Go ahead. Who said something?
Freedom of assembly.
Freedom of assembly. That's a good one. Good one for noting that one. Okay. I got 2 more. Freedom of the press, and the last one. This is, I like him. Freedom to petition the government for grievances. Did he have his phone out? No, that's good. That's good. 5 things, and a lot of people can really maybe name 2, sometimes 3, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of the press, which we get blasted with all the time when you're watching CNN and MSNBC. Well, I can say whatever I want, freedom of the press. So, the Danbury Baptists wrote to President Jefferson in regards to the First Amendment because they were concerned that the Constitution didn't go far enough in order to secure their right to worship freely. So I want to read to you their letter to President Jefferson and then his response as well. So this is to Thomas Jefferson, President of the United States. Sir, among the many millions in America and Europe who rejoice in your election to office, we embrace the first opportunity which we have enjoyed in our collective capacity since your inauguration to express our great satisfaction in your appointment to the Chief Magistracy in the United States. And though our mode of expression may be less courtly and pompous than what many others clothe their addresses with, we beg you, sir, to believe that none are more sincere. Our sentiments are uniformly on the side of religious liberty, that religion is at all times and places a matter between God and individuals, that no man ought to suffer in name, person, or effects on account of his religious opinions, that the legitimate power of civil government extends no further than to punish the man who works ill to his neighbors. But, sir, our constitution of government is not specific. Our ancient charter, together with the law made coincident therewith were adopted as the basis of our government at the time of our revolution, and such had been our laws and usages, and such still are, that religion is considered as the first object of legislation, and therefore what religious privileges we enjoy. We enjoy as favors granted and not as inalienable rights. And these favors we receive at the expense of such degrading acknowledgments as are inconsistent with the rights of free men. It is not to be wondered at, therefore, if those who seek after power and gain under the pretense of government and religion should reproach their fellow men, should reproach their order magistrate as an enemy of religion, law, and good order. Because he will not, dare not, assume the prerogatives of Jehovah and make laws to govern the kingdom of Christ, so we are sensible that the President of the United States is not the national legislator, and also sensible that the national government cannot destroy the laws of each state. But our hopes are strong that the sentiments of our beloved President, which have had such genial effect already, like the radiant beams of the sun, will shine and prevail through all these states and all the world, till hierarchy and tyranny be destroyed from the earth. Sir, when we reflect on your past services and see a glow of philanthropy and goodwill shining forth in a course of more than 30 years, we have reason to believe that America's God has raised you up to fill the chair of state out of that goodwill which he bears to the millions which you preside over. May God strengthen you for your arduous task, which providence and the voice of people have called you to sustain, and support you in joy administration against all the predetermined opposition of those who wish to raise to wealth and importance on the poverty and subjugation of the people. And may the Lord preserve you safe from every evil and bring you at last to his heavenly kingdom through Jesus Christ, our glorious mediator. So what the Danbury Baptists were saying to President Jefferson at the time was, we believe that there may be some holes in our First Amendment, that we are afraid that there may be an opportunity for the government to step in, as had been done before, as we had escaped from centuries before, or at least a century before, to come over here and get away from that. The government could come in and squash your right to practice your religion freely, right? So Thomas Jefferson wrote back to that, and this is where the crux of this argument is going to come from tonight, the separation of church and state, okay? So this is from Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptists. Gentlemen, the affectionate sentiments of a... By the way, don't they write awesome? Like, what happened to us, guys? LOL? No. Stop it. The affectionate sentiments of esteem and approbation which you are so good as to express toward me, on behalf of the Danbury Baptist Association, give me the highest satisfaction. My duties dictate a faithful and zealous pursuit of the interests of my constituents, and in proportion as they are persuaded of my fidelity to those duties, the discharge of them becomes more and more pleasing, believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his wealth or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only, and not opinions. I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people which declared that their legislators should, quote, make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. Adhering to this expression of the supreme will of the nation in behalf of the rights of conscience, I shall see with sincere satisfaction the progress of those sentiments which tend to restore to man all his natural rights. Convinced he has no natural right in opposition to his social duties, I reciprocate your kind prayers for the protection and blessing of the common Father and Creator of man, and tender you for yourselves and your religious association assurances of my high respect and esteem. Signed, President Thomas Jefferson. Again, why can't we write like this anymore, right? Even I'm guilty. So what President Thomas Jefferson was saying at the time is, you are protected, and that he is one of those people that will fight for you and has fought for you in order to have that protection to worship freely, and that the government stands behind, and that the separation of church and state as laid out in Thomas Jefferson's letter is more of an association in regards to government not overstepping its bounds into the church. Now, there are going to be things that stop that, right? I mean, if you're a religion that sacrifices people or something like that, obviously we're talking about different circumstances and they are going to step in. But the right to worship your God is supported by the president at that time, okay? Does anybody believe here, I know we have a bunch of smart people, so it would be nice if I could put someone in their place. Does anybody believe that the separation of church and state is something that can be found in our Constitution? Good, so I won't challenge anyone, because I was going to hand it over and ask you to look for it, but it's not in there, okay? The separation of church and state has always been something that was said in regards to the backing of Thomas Jefferson, but the other side of that opinion nowadays has come from those that believe that it's a wall between church and state, and that it goes both ways, not just one way, right? Now, we talked in the beginning, too, about how our founding fathers were often seen as non-religious people, that they were people that didn't have faith in God. And in my research, now, granted, it was last minute. Last night I was looking up some of the founding fathers' remarks in regards to God. You are going to be shocked, and I think, like me, you will probably be in love with some of the things that the founding fathers and some of the more important men in our country's history had to say about God. So I want to read through some of those. Actually, before I go to that, there are some places in Washington, D.C. How many of you go to Washington, D.C. frequently? How many of you have been to Washington, D.C.? How many of you have walked around the monuments in D.C.? Have you taken the opportunity to read what's on the walls of those monuments? Because a lot of people, what I'm personally most afraid of is that we are reaching a time. Let me put it this way. Right now, there's a college out on the West Coast that wants to remove a bust of Martin Luther King because they find his "I Have a Dream" speech offensive. The left. Why would they find that offensive? Because Martin Luther King said, "Judge me not by the color of my skin, but the content of my character." But we have become a country of identity politics where we are only supposed to judge on the color of skin, the basis of sex, the basis of gender, and everything else. So they find offense to this now because you're not doing what Martin Luther King said. You should not be listening to that. Does anybody have an objection to the fact that I believe in modern day JFK would have no chance of being elected today in today's Democratic Party? A Catholic that was pro-life, waged wars, he would be considered a moderate Republican today. Okay? That's beyond the point. I'm getting off topic, and I'm sure, yeah, she's smiling back there because she knows I have my ADD moments. So what are we talking about? Oh, the Washington, D.C. monuments. Okay, so what I want to do is read off to you some of the Washington, D.C. monuments and what's said on the walls. And here's what I was going to say. I'm back on track. Here we go. What I fear is that we are reaching a time. Right now, removing the bust of Martin Luther King from display is something easy to do. But what happens when those people come out and say, en masse, whether it's pitchforks and torches or chisels in their hands, that we need to remove God from the sayings that are etched historically into our monuments down in Washington, D.C.? Because if you think that's not going to happen, I have news for you, it probably will. And in our lifetime, I believe. Okay? But for right now, if you visit the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C., on the northeast interior wall is an excerpt from the 1777 Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. It says, "Almighty God hath created the mind free. All attempts to influence it by temporal punishments or burthens are a departure from the plan of the holy author of our religion. No man shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship or ministry, or shall otherwise suffer on account of his religious opinions or belief. But all men shall be free to profess and by argument to maintain Their opinions in matters of religion. I know but one code of morality for men, whether acting singly or collectively. I'm starting to dry up, sorry. Man, it sounds like Jefferson was not a fan of God, huh? How about this one? This is a panel on the northeast interior of the wall from multiple sources. This isn't just one speech. God who gave us life gave us liberty. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are the gift of God? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever. Commerce between master and slave is despotism. Nothing is more certainly written in the book of fate than these people are to be free. Establish the law for educating the common people. That is the business of the state to effect and on a general plan. We can go over to the Washington Monument as well. Inscribed on the aluminum cap, notable names and dates in the monument's construction are recalled, and on the east face, facing the rising sun, the Latin words Laus Deo, which translates to praise be to God. And in the House and Senate chambers, above and etched in, I believe it's marble, is In God We Trust. Again, how much longer are these going to last in our capital? So I talked about the founding fathers and some of the more important men in our history and the founding of our country and everything, and that they were believers in God and the things that they have said in the past. So I hope you enjoy these as much as me. This is from John Adams. The general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. That's weird. I thought we weren't founded on Judeo-Christian values. But John Adams was one of the two presidents that signed the Declaration of Independence. Okay, the other being Thomas Jefferson himself. I will avow that I then believed, and now believe, that those general principles of Christianity are as eternal and immutable as the existence and attributes of God. That was one quote. Here's another one. This has actually made Leslie and I laugh last night. Without religion, this world would be something not fit to be mentioned in polite company. I mean hell. Okay. The Christian religion is above all the religions that ever prevailed or existed in ancient or modern times, the religion of wisdom, virtue, equity, and humanity. And the last one from John Adams. Suppose a nation in some distant region should take the Bible for their only law book, and every member should regulate his conduct by the precepts there exhibited. What a utopia, what a paradise would this region be? Basically what he's saying there is if they were to take God's word and make that law of the land, it would be a utopia. John Quincy Adams. The hope of the Christian is inseparable from his faith. Whoever believes in the divine inspiration of the Holy Scriptures must hope that the religion of Jesus shall prevail throughout the earth. Never since the foundation of the world have the prospects of mankind been more encouraging to that hope than they appear to be at the present time. And may the associated distribution of the Bible proceed and prosper till the Lord shall have made, quote, bear his holy arm in the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God. So now we have John Quincy Adams saying, if you're a nation, you should be founded on the principles and values of Christianity, because it will make a better society. In the chain of human events, the birthday of the nation is indissolubly linked with the birthday of the Savior. The Declaration of Independence laid the cornerstone of human government upon the first precepts of Christianity. So, we got done reading the Declaration of Independence earlier, and we talked about how it talked about God and the rights that are bestowed on us, at least the main three, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, in regards to what God has tried to give us. Let's go to Sam Adams, not the beer. It's actually founded on someone, okay? I conceive we cannot better express ourselves than by humbly supplicating the supreme ruler of the world, that the confusions that are and have been among the nations may be overruled by the promoting and speedily bringing in the holy and happy period when the kingdoms of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ may be everywhere established, and the people willingly bow to the scepter of him who is the Prince of Peace. Any Benjamin Franklin fans in here? He was a pretty cool dude. He was older when we got into the founding of the country. As to, you know what, actually, here's another thing. Leslie pointed this out to me last night. There's a lot of people that say specifically, right, Benjamin Franklin, that he was not a Christian, that he believed in God, but not Christ as God, okay? And I think I dispelled that in here with one of the quotes I found, but let's take a look at it here. As to Jesus of Nazareth, my opinion of whom you particularly desire, I think the system of morals and his religion, as he left them to us, the best the world ever saw or is likely to see. So, I don't know. Maybe that's not pointing to him believing that Christ is God, but it's certainly saying that Jesus' words are invaluable throughout time. This is one of my favorite things right here. Unfortunately, in my lifetime, I have had to write 2 eulogies for people I loved that I didn't want to see go. Okay, my dad's parents. Ben Franklin wrote his own eulogy, and I was joking with Leslie last night. I think I'm probably going to have to write my own because no one else is going to do it. So, Franklin wrote his own eulogy, and it said, "The body of Benjamin Franklin, printer, like the cover of an old book, its contents torn out and stripped of its lettering and gilding, lies here food for worms. Yet the work itself shall not be lost, for it will, as he believed, appear once more in a new and more beautiful edition, corrected and amended by the author," in capital letters. What a beautiful, and at first you're like, worm food? What the heck is this guy talking about? But he's talking about an old book becoming new content being put in for in heaven, his life in heaven, right? So I thought that was pretty beautiful as well. Patrick Henry, "The great pillars of all government and of social life are virtue, morality, and religion. This is the armor, my friend, and this alone that renders us invincible." You know, here's another, actually, that reminds me of another interesting thing in regards to Abraham Lincoln. Back when we started the Civil War, we were losing a lot of battles in the Civil War as the North, the Union, okay? It wasn't until Abraham Lincoln told the nation to get on their knees and pray for forgiveness for the sins that we had committed in our own personal lives and as a country, that after that we won almost every single battle as a Union. Pretty fascinating. Sorry for Southerners that are in the crowd here, but, you know. George Washington. Is George Washington anyone's favorite president, by the way? You got a lot of, okay. George Washington is one of my favorite presidents. I would encourage people to look into Calvin Coolidge. Now, that's a cool dude right there. George Washington, "The blessing and protection of heaven are at all times necessary, but especially so in times of public distress and danger. The general hopes and trusts that every officer and man will endeavor to live and act as becomes a Christian soldier, defending the dearest rights and liberties of his country." So we were talking a lot about how government is associated with religion and everything, but George Washington, obviously, prior to being president, was the general of the military, right? So he's talking about, as a country, how our military should be following the morals and values and principles of Christ as well. That being a Christian soldier will lead you to a better soldier existence, essentially. Now, this is really fascinating, too. It's one thing to hear from each individual what they thought about God and government and everything, but how about declarations from Congress as a body themselves in regards to God? So these both were declarations in 1854 by our Congress. "The great, vital, and conservative element in our system is a belief of our people in the pure doctrines and the divine truths of the gospel of Jesus Christ." The other one is, "Had the people," this is fascinating to me, "had the people during the revolution had a suspicion of any attempt to war against Christianity, that revolution would have been strangled in its cradle. In this age, there can be no substitute for Christianity. That was the religion of the founders of the Republic, and they expected it to remain the religion of their descendants." Going over and saying that our founding fathers were in fact Christians, a lot of them at least, and that we founded this country on Christian morals, values, and principles. So why is this important? The question I started off everything with tonight is, is it taboo for us to be talking about religion and politics in society? A lot of us have grown up, not necessarily in my house. Trust me, it's a weird thing. They never talk about politics, and I end up like this, right? So but there's a lot of things. I always say there's a lot of life events, and I think that's the way most people grow up. There's a lot of life events, especially things that I've experienced through my father's eyes and everything, that have happened throughout time that have led me into the positions that I have today. Believe it or not, if you were to ask me in high school when I was politically ignorant where I stand, I would have told you I was a liberal, pro-choice person, because that's what public education has done to us. They have indoctrinated our youth to believe certain things, right? And life experiences have led me to Republican, to me shunning Republicans completely, being a conservative, believing that's not far enough, being libertarian, constitutionalist. I believe that our founding documents are timeless pieces that apply throughout time. No matter what technology we come out with today, those documents apply to how we can live our life and rule this country as we the people, not a king over us, okay? Even though we seem to want to set dynasties in place with some of these families and everything, like the Bushes, the Clintons, and everybody else. I'm sure Michelle will eventually run at some point in time, too. So why is it taboo to talk about religion and politics? Well, I have my own theory on that. I believe that we are told that because the social issues that separate us the most are a voting wedge that are put there by the politicians in this country to divide us into separate groups and keep us from participating in civil debate with one another. And believe me, civil debate is far and few between anymore. Now people immediately respond by going to riots or shutting down free speech on college campuses by conservative speakers who just want to talk about policy, right? I personally believe, and I think a lot of people believe, that the more we talk to each other about religion and politics, the more we actually start to find out that we have a lot more in common than we have in differences, and we start to come together. And when we start to come together, the people in power start to lose their power because we are no longer separated into these voting blocks that they expect us to be in. Okay? That's why a lot of third-party candidates have been having a great run lately. Whether they win or not, they've been getting a lot of attention. Bernie Sanders being one, right? So not necessarily the principles that a lot of people, Americans, believe in because of all the countries that you can escape socialism from. Why would you want to come here and turn us into a socialist country, right? But let's talk about why religion in politics is important, okay? So we can talk about that stuff, and let's talk about it real quick, okay? The morals and values and principles that we put into our policies that come from Christian principles are one of the only moral ways of guiding our people, okay? Let's talk about life real quick, okay? I know a lot of people have been affected by the issue of being pro-life or pro-choice, and there's some people in this room and everything. Personally, I'm one of them. I gave a choice in regards to two topics that I would talk about tonight when I talk to Ginger, okay? The first of which has become extremely important to me as a pro-life person, okay? I'm not going to go through the whole story because that is a story for another time, but it wasn't until my college years that I actually learned that my grandfather, the father of my uncle and my mother here, was himself the product of a rape. And that if he had been aborted at that time, there would be, and last I counted, 28 less family members here today, which is pretty phenomenal, right? So I am, when I talk about pro-life, the third generation product of a rape. My children are the fourth generation. That's pretty fascinating. One person literally just said to me lately, well, that's your story, right? You're one of how many people, right? Well, actually, I'm one of 28 people that I count that has a good story, and right within my immediate family. I think that's pretty good numbers, right? So, but if we were to look at what is talked about today in regards to the human species, we keep on disconnecting ourselves from God when it comes to policies. A lot of people want to say that are godless people, that don't have faith in God, that we are just like every other animal in the kingdom. We just happen to have it better off, that we're the apex predator, right? Well, if I look out at the animal kingdom, I see a lot of killing their own kind, nothing legislating that and having any morals or values going over that, and any consequences or anything. You know, what was I listening to today? Dolphins. Okay, a lot of people think that dolphins are great. They're actually jerks in the sea. You know, they're really smart, yes, but male dolphins will actually murder the babies of other dolphins if they feel that if it's not their baby, so that they can mate. Okay, that's why female dolphins. Forgive me, it sounds a little weird, but female dolphins will sleep around a lot so that the dolphins don't know if it's their dolphins or not that are there. And it actually has saved the pods of dolphins and everything. But how do we know? How do we know when we go out into society that it's wrong to kill someone? Why is it wrong? Animals do it all the time, right? Because we have morals and values put into place that we know inherently that are wrong. And those types of things, and that list can go on and on, but I've been talking for a while, those types of things are only set in our heart and written on our heart because of our God. Right? So, the question we started this off with is talking religion and politics taboo? Is this country founded on the tenets of Christianity and Judaism? Well, the answer to that question is obviously yes. The Founding Fathers, in their own words, would tell you that. Is it talking about religion and politics taboo in today's society? Yeah, it certainly is, because we've been indoctrinated for decades now to tell you that it is wrong to do that. But is it? Because we can actually come together more if we start talking about these things and have more in common and have civil debates. And we need to get back to that, because we are becoming animals in our society. If you want to be compared to animals, that's what we're becoming, because a lot less people are following God. So, any questions from anyone at all, or comments? Oh, Forrest.
I got a comment.
Yes.
Because I got to tell you that we've heard some great things about young people in this country now that are doing exactly what they're doing.
I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Young people in this country are starting to learn that, hey, we've been lied to.
Yes.
We've been lied to right along. And they're starting to build in the younger forces more kids who want to say, I don't want to go that way. That's the wrong way. We're going the wrong way.
So what Forrest is saying here is that a lot of young people are starting to wake up to the fact that something's wrong in our society, right? And that's interesting the way you put that. Because I think what a lot of people, what Pastor Shea has talked about in the past, and what pastors have said that I've listened to elsewhere, is that a lot of people that have problems in their lives have a hole in their life that they're trying to fill with other things in society, whether that's drugs or sleeping around or adrenaline junkies or anything like that, or what have you, you know? That there's a hole there for a reason, because they're not following Christ. Christ isn't filling that hole for them, and that's what he could do for you, you know? So in response to Forrest's statement there, what I'm actually seeing is that, yes, a lot of young people are starting to wake up and take a close eye to these things, but unfortunately, we do not have the right leaders in society. I'm not talking about just political leaders, but we each can be a leader in our respective homes, in our communities, and everything else, to be able to lead these people in religion towards Christ, or in morality, values, and principles towards policies that our governments legislate, to guide them in the right direction and make them realize that there's a reason why people in mass are escaping other countries right now to come here, and yet they want to turn us into the same thing that they're escaping from. Well, why? You know? So no one's actually telling them, hey, you're being led in the wrong direction. Like, turn off the news completely. I don't watch the news. I don't have cable. You know, I do research online, and one of the things I find most valuable is to look at both sides, see where that crosses over, see what those facts are, and then do some research on those facts and come up with your own opinion, right? Anybody? Yeah, Caleb.
I know you were talking about religion and our documentation. Do you know any of the history behind, like, that all the money says in God we trust? Is there, like, documentation from our founding fathers that states the reason why? Not that, I mean, obviously I support it, but I didn't know if there was any...
I don't know the history behind the money insignia itself, but I think that you can see the inspiration from a lot of the things that they said in the past, that's for sure. Forrest, yeah.
God we trust came from one of the first people appointed as head of the mint.
Yes, yep. Alexander Hamilton? Was that Hamilton that did that? Yeah. Anybody else? Well, I'm sorry to take up your time, but I appreciate everyone. I appreciate you coming out tonight. Thank you very much.